Making graphs in Excel doesn't have to be boring or confusing. In this video I'll show you how to pick the right chart, make it look clean, and format it so it actually makes sense. We'll go step by step from basic setups to small tricks that make a big difference. Let's turn your data into something that people understand and like. So here I have a sales dataset with year details from 2013 to 2024, as well as the sales amounts that were generated in each one of those years. I would like to visualize this so I get an idea of the trend, if the sales are going up or down. So in order to visualize things in Excel, you firstly have to highlight your data, including the headers, like this. And as you see, I have chosen to leave the total out of the selection, and I will come back to it in a second. Then go to Insert ribbon, and under the Charts pane you have a lot of options. Firstly, you have recommended charts, and if you click here, you will see that Excel is already recommending a lot of different alternatives. So there's a scatter plot, which is really the different data points represented as dots in your graph across the two different dimensions. Then you have a bar chart, also a very popular choice, and so on. So for now, I'm gonna go with a line chart and click OK. So now we have our first graph, and you can of course customize every bit of the graph that you already have in front of you. How you do that? Firstly, you have to select your chart and you get a few options here on the right. If you click the plus icon, you see the different chart elements that are already part of the graph. For example, we already have axes. Yes, here they are. We have the chart title, we have the grid lines, and there are a lot of other things that we could have, but we do not have yet. So let's try a few of those. So how about the data labels? If I come over here and hover, you will see how the graph will look like when I press. And I like what I see. I like data labels being on my graph, so I'm gonna click here, like this. Now, some people might not like the grid line, so they can take that away. I'm gonna keep it for now. And what I would like also to have is a trend line. So if I click here, you see this new dotted line that represents the overall trend of my graph. Now, if you click here where it says data table, you get below the graph a summary of the data on which it is based on. Personally, I don't like it. I think it makes it too busy, so I'm gonna take it away. Talking about busy, you can also see that some of our labels are actually overlapping. So you can move those around like this if you would like to, or remove them again altogether like this. Now you can customize further your graph by selecting it, and you see on top you have two new tabs appearing, Chart Design and Format. Now under Chart Design, you can see here there are so many chart styles that you can select, and what I find really cool is that as you hover over, you can see how it will look like, so you can make an informed decision. I think I'm gonna go with this one for now. I mentioned before that I chose not to include the total among the data points for this graph. By the way, if you ever forget the data points for one of your graphs, you can just click on the graph and you can see already that they are highlighted on the left side. What is pretty cool is that you can expand or reduce your data range at any point. For example, what if I do this? You can see that my graph updates to include data only up to 2021. And what if we decide to expand this data to include the total row as well? Now this really disrupts our graph, and it totally makes sense because the total is of course the sum of all the previous rows. This is not really a meaningful visualization, and we better exclude that as well. In fact, I'm gonna delete these values. And you see that the graph updates accordingly. What if we add one more row of data that represents 2025 sales? So let's say we click here, and then let's say that it's 200,000. You see that the graph updates again. Now you can always change your graph type anytime you would like to. And as it happens with all modifications on your charts, you just have to start by selecting the chart. Then here on the top, under Chart Design, you can go to Change Chart Type and select any other from the list that we saw before. So I'm gonna go with a column chart for now and keep the same style. Now, if you spend quite some time modifying a chart and you reach the style that you like, you can always save that as a template for future use. For example, here, I can highlight my graph, right-click, and then Save as Templates. And you're asked to provide a name for Excel to save your template. I will keep it as it is. I'm gonna click save. And let's imagine that tomorrow I'm interested to create one more chart like this. So here I have one dataset which happens to be identical like the one before. And if I go to insert and then go to charts, I can go to all charts, templates, and here I have the template that I defined just a second ago. I can select it, click OK, and here you have one very quick chart based on previous modifications and changes that I did. So now we have a very nice graph, but what else we can do with that? Let's see, we can customize the title. If you select it, you can start typing directly in the formula bar, for example, my sales data, and click enter, and you see it's already in the graph. But what's quite cool as well is that you can create a dynamic formula and use that instead as a title in your graph. For example, I know that my data includes sales from 2013 to 2024, and I can create dynamic fields that show me the years of those dates. For example, here I can put the year of the first date in my dataset, and just below the year of the last date in my dataset. And I can start typing here, for example, sales data, then the ampersand, then highlight the cell A21, then introduce a hyphen, and then again ampersand, and then cell A22, and press enter. Nice, so I can make this dynamic formula the title of my graph. I can highlight the title again, go to the formula bar, press equals, and then the cell C20. Here it is. Apart from that, you can customize pretty much anything in the graph. For example, I can select the graph, and under home, I can go here and fill a different color in the background. Or I can select one of the axes, like here, right click and select add major grid lines to add grid lines only with respect to that axis. Lastly, you can filter data directly from your graph. For example, if I click here, I can go to filter and select which data points I would like to include. So I'm gonna deselect those and apply, and you see the graph adjusting accordingly. Lastly, don't forget that if you select the chart, you have also the format tab, and in here you have all sorts of options, some of which we have already seen, but some others as well. For example, we can always select any of those styles, and so on. Now, what if you would like to keep your chart in a separate worksheet without the data just next to it? Well, that's easy. You can select your chart, then go to chart design, move chart, and then you can select your new location. So let's say we say new sheet, click OK, and here you have it. And here you can, as always, customize it to your liking. But personally, I like having the data just next to the graph for convenience, so I'm gonna go back to the previous page. Let's look at some other graphs. Firstly, the map. Here I have a dataset with countries and the different sales that each one of those countries has generated. In order to introduce a map, I have to, as always, select our dataset, go to Insert, and already here you have the map option that you can of course reach even if you go to the recommended charts and select it from here. You can click OK, and here you have the map. So as any other chart, you can customize it by selecting a different style, changing the chart title, for example, sales by country, and so on. And we can quickly understand from the color coding here that USA is the country with the highest sales, as we can also verify from our dataset here. Then let's look at the scatter plot. A scatter plot is a graph that shows the relationship between two numerical values of your dataset. In our case, that can be sales and profit, by plotting them as individual points. That makes it very easy to find trends, understand patterns, and also identify outliers. Let's look at it. So here I have the countries as well as the sales and profit by country. In order to create a scatter plot, I can just select the dataset, like this, go to Insert, and you have here the scatter plot option. So here we have a scatter plot, but we need to adjust it a bit. Firstly, I'm going to introduce axis titles. And here is the profit, while here is the sales. Now, while I'm hovering at any point, I can see the sales and the profit values for each one of those. But I was hoping to have the country name on top of each one of those points so that I understand quickly which country represents. In order to do that, I have to select the data points like this, right-click, and then add data labels. Now I have some data label, but not exactly what I was hoping for, but I can customize it. In order to customize them, I can select them like this, and then here on the right side, I have the option label contains value from sales. If I select it, Excel asks me to identify the range of sales from where I can pick the different data labels. I can do it like this, select the different countries, and then enter OK. So you see now that two pieces of information are displayed for each one of the data points. The first one is the country, which is great, and the second one is the value of the y-axis, which I wouldn't like to have at this stage since it becomes very busy. So I can remove it by unclicking here. So here you have it, a scatter plot with the country names as the data labels. And of course, you can make it bigger if you would like to see how each one of those countries is placed within the graph. Of course, you can customize it as we can do with any other graph in Excel by selecting it, going to Chart Design and picking another style. And of course, under the Format tab, you have so many other options to play with. Next up, the pie chart. A pie chart shows how different components make up a whole by dividing a circle into different slices based on a proportion or a percentage. It's best for quickly comparing categories, for example, how much is each country's share of the total sales. Let's look at an example. So here I have the different countries and the respective sales. To create a pie chart, I can select the dataset, go to Insert, and here I already have the pie chart option. You can select between two-dimensional options, 3D option, as well as the donut, which I feel is a bit more elegant. Of course, you can customize it to different styles as well. Finally, let's look at pivot charts. Pivot charts is really the visual equivalent of pivot table, and they're ideal for quickly analyzing and exploring a large dataset. They update automatically as you drag fields in and out from the pivot chart, the same way that pivot tables would behave. Let's look at them. So here I have a big dataset that I have converted to an Excel table by pressing Ctrl-T, and now I'm gonna go to Insert, and instead of creating a pivot table, I can go to Pivot Chart here and select that I will have it created in a new worksheet, click OK, and here you have it. You can see that it follows a very similar layout as pivot tables do, where you have 4 different panes here on the bottom right side. In this case, they are called filters, legend, values, and axis. In the sales, I would normally enter fields that I would like to summarize or aggregate. In my case, I would like to see the total sales of this dataset. So I'm going to drag this here, and I'm interested to see the total sum of sales, so I'm going to go and change this here in the menu. On top of that, I would like to slice and dice it firstly by country, so I'm going to go here, search for the country detail, and introduce it to the axis, like this. So here I have a bar chart that shows the sales by country. Let's try to customize it a bit. I can go to Design, select a different style, or go to Format, and for example, change the border. You have the flexibility that you have for any other graph in Excel. Now let's say that I would like to analyze it further by product category. I can go here to the fields, search for product, and I have the product line detail that I'm gonna bring in the legend. You can see that the pivot chart has adjusted accordingly, and I have the countries here in the x-axis and a color coding for each one of the data points in the x-axis that shows me the different product lines. However, I'm afraid that's a bit busy now, so to make it cleaner, I will move the product line to the filter area. Now it's much easier to read, and you can see that the product line has been moved here on the upper left side. And I can go here and filter for a specific product category, for example, vintage cars. Click OK. And here I can see that, for example, France and USA are the top selling countries for this specific category. Now, please note that while I'm filtering things or while I'm moving things around here in the pivot chart fields, there is a pivot table that adjusts accordingly. For example, I can move the product line back to the legend, and you see the pivot table in the background adjusting as well. That's also a proof that pivot chart and pivot table are very much intertwined. So now you know how to insert a table, modify it as you would like by changing the title, the axis, the legends, and so on, and making the most out of your data. See you in the next video.